Hello, we are looking at decimals today, but we can't do decimals without understanding fractions. Now, I think now you do all have a pretty good grasp of fractions. So decimals are the same as fractions. They're just a different way of them being represented. So when we look at the fraction a half, we write it as 1 over 2, okay, like this. If we wanted to represent that as a decimal fraction, it looks like this. Sorry, it doesn't look like that at all. It looks like this. 0.5. Now, some of you I know find it difficult to understand why it's 0.5 and not 0.2 or 0.1, because those numbers are in a half. And what we need to do today is to look at why we do that. Now, when we talk about decimals, the word deca, I suppose, comes from the Latin for 10. And that's because decimals are on a base 10 system, and they can either be tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on, just like our number line. Now we start, if I draw a number line to start with, we have, I'll do a simple one. So we start off, we've got our hundreds, our tens, and our units. Now if we wanted to keep going, we'd have thousands, tens of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, and it would keep going that way. And it's the same going this way with our decimals. So we start off, we've got tenths, hundredths, thousands, thousandths, and we'd go tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and so on. We don't need to deal with anything bigger or smaller, I suppose, than this at the moment. What you need to remember is that every number one place to the right is 10 times smaller. Is that right? No, I can't do it back to front. If you've got a unit, so anything to the right of this number is 10 times smaller than that number. So if we had the number 1 here, if we put it here, if we moved it here, it would become 0.1. That means it's this number 1 is 10 times smaller than this number 1. Or you could say that this number 1 is 10 times bigger than this number 1. Okay, so 1 is 10 times bigger than 0.1. If we had 10 there, okay, so 10 is 10 times bigger than 1, and it's 100 times bigger than 0.1. I think I'm going off track a bit here though, so we want to get back to why is a half written as 0.5. So we'll start off with a grid. So if we imagine our whole number is divided into 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I've done a very bad picture of a... That's our whole one, and it's got 10 stripes, 10 pieces. Now, if I'd done it properly, they'd all be absolutely exactly the same, but for the purposes of this, I've just drawn it quickly so you can see. So this is our whole one. Now, if we were going to colour half of that in, you know that we would colour in 5 out of 10 of them, okay, because, and you know that 5 out of 10 can be simplified to a half. So let's quickly colour in 5 out of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So 5 of them out of 10 are coloured in, which makes it 0.5. Okay, 0.5. Now if we're only going to colour one of those out of 10, that would be 0.1. Okay, and another way we can write that is 1/10. Okay, so 0.1 is the same as 1/10. Now, with the work you're going to be doing today, you need to be able to convert between fractions and decimals, and then go the other way from decimals to fractions. So, sorry, there's lots going on out there. Try not to be distracted. Right, so to start with, you've got some pictures. You should have this sheet, hopefully, here. Now, looking at these first pictures, all of those circles have been divided into 10, and it asks you to say what part of each shape is shaded. Really important, you read the question, it says write your answer as a fraction and as a decimal fraction. Okay, so the first one, 9 out of 10 have been coloured in. So that's, you're going to write down 9/10, 9 out of 10. You're also going to write it down as your decimal, which is 0.9. Okay, if we look at number 2, only one of them has been coloured in. That's 1 out of 10, or 0.1. Okay, I'm going to leave the rest for you to do yourself. When you get to number 9, it gets a bit trickier. So let's have a look at how we do number 9. Now you've got a number line there, and it goes between 1 and 3. Now that's it simply, but the one in the book has got lines in between them all, and it asks you to write down what numbers are in certain places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here we go. So A points to A there. Now this is one whole one. Okay, so our answer for A is going to be 1 point something, isn't it? Okay, so you're going to put 1 point, no, it's three lines in, so it's going to be 1.3. So you write A like that, 1.3, because it's one whole one in and it's 3 along, and there are 10 altogether, so that's 0.3 along. Okay, now I'll leave you to work out the rest on your own. When you get to the next 10 to 18, they've given you what we call a vulgar fraction, the fractions we've been dealing with for the last week or so, and they want you to convert it into a decimal fraction. Most of them they're all tenths, so they're all quite easy. Some of them are whole numbers as well, or what we call mixed numbers, because so we've got the first one is just 4/10. Okay, so when you write that down, you should all know that that is 0.4. I think you probably all get that. If we look at number 12, it's 3 3/10. Okay, so 3 stays the same because it's still 3 whole ones. Now we have to write 3/10 down, so it's going to be 3.3. Okay, so 3 3/10 is the same as 3.3. Okay, so you should be able to, so A I think is fairly straightforward. When you move on to B, we're moving into hundredths now. Okay, so we go back to our whole one that's divided into tenths, which I shall do quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, here we go. So it starts off divided into 10, but if we divide it the other way as well, it's going to be divided into hundredths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Right. The last one's a bit squashed, but there you go. So that's been divided into 100 pieces. So every one of those, instead of being 0.1, is going to be 0.01 now. Okay, because what we've done is we've gone 10 times smaller. Okay, so one whole strip, because that's a tenth of it, is 0.1, and one tiny square is 0.01. The other, if we were going to write that as a vulgar fraction, we'd write that as 1 over 100. Okay, and that's one tiny square, 0.01 or 1 over 100. So for B 1 to 4, you've got to it's counting the squares, and you've got to write those down as a fraction and as a decimal. Okay, so if we look at the first one, I think there are 26 squares coloured in there. So if we were going to write that, we can't do it on this side. So that's 26 out of 100. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. That's 26 out of 100. If we wanted to write that with a decimal, it's 0.26. Okay. Then you have, for number 5, and 6, you have a nice number line. They're quite tricky. So just be careful with those ones. But if you look at the numbers at the beginning and the end, it will help you to work out where your numbers are. If you find number 5 and 6 too hard to do, leave them out and go on to number 7. Okay, on number 7, you are giving the value of the underlined figure. So if the number is in, I should be able to work it out. Let's quickly, we're going to have, I'll do tens and units, tenths and hundredths. So if your number, here we go, if we have the number 18.67 and this number is underlined, that's in the units column, so that is 8 units. Okay, if we underline this one, can't do it back to front, if we underline this one, this is in the tenths column, so we would write it as, remember, 0. Can't do it upside down, 0.6. okay, that's if that one was underlined. If it was the 7 that was underlined, we do 0.07. okay, so just remember, when it asks you to underline a number, which is a decimal, if you turn all the other numbers in the number to zeros and just leave the one that isn't, that's underlined, you'll get the right answer. I think I'm waffling a bit. We've been going 11 minutes, so anyway. The next questions, 19 to 24, quite tricky. You've got to, well, they're not tricky, you just need to work out what's being added or taken away each time, and you need to add or take away this from the sequence. You need to write the next 5 terms in each sequence. Now, if you're feeling really brave, you could move on to section C. I'm not saying you have to. I think A and B is probably more than enough. But I know that some of you will want the challenge. So those of you that are feeling keen, have a go at doing C as well. I've waffled on enough for now, so I'm not going to talk anymore. Be brilliant. If you need help, come to the Zoom session. Okay?